Really excited to be here this evening and share a little bit about my experience with kind of coding for good. So by day, I'm a community architect at RedHat. Basically, for those who've known me for a while, I've worked on our opensource.com project for about 10 years. If you're not familiar with that, it's an online publication and community where we're highlighting how the principles of open source technology can change the world. But for the last year, I've been working on a new project to build a community of system administrators. It's located on the web at redhat.com/sysadmin, and we're calling the project Enable Sysadmin. So by night, I'm definitely a self-proclaimed civic geek. I volunteer with the Open Raleigh Brigade, which I'll be talking about this evening. I'm co-chair for NC Open Pass, which is the Open Raleigh Brigade event series that we put on. Might be a little challenging this year, given the current situation. And I'm a former Code for America National Advisory Council member, and I'll talk a little about Code for America throughout the evening. So in the title of the talk, we talk about social enterprise. And so I'm going to be using the terminology civic tech to kind of talk about social enterprise, because that's where a lot of my experience comes from. But a lot of the volunteers that I work with through Code for America, they come from a variety of companies and organizations that definitely support social enterprise activities and efforts. So what is civic tech? Civic tech is a movement where technologists work with other volunteers who are passionate about strengthening their community. And really, the goal is to improve government services and to use things like open data to create maps, apps, and really to make more information easier to consume. So let's jump right in and show you the kind of this power of civic tech. The app you're seeing here is called Adopt a Hydrant. It was developed using a code fellowship with the city of Boston. And the problem was pretty simple. The city of Boston wanted to allow citizens to adopt fire hydrants so that during winter weather events, they could volunteer to help clear out the snow and the ice around the hydrants. Just like, if you can think, just like you would adopt a highway or a stream from your local city or your local DOT for litter cleanup. What's really interesting about this application is that it provides citizens a way to help the city to volunteer in a time of need. And typically it's when the city is low on resources and particularly low on mobility in this case. So Adopta is a software application with an open source license. And that means that the program source code is available for inspection, modification, and enhancements. If you're not familiar with open source, I always like to describe it like a recipe. If you think about a recipe, it's a list of ingredients and a set of instructions on how to prepare and how to cook food, right? You can see the ingredients, you can see the steps, and because you can see that, you can change it and you can modify it. And that's exactly what this means in the programming and software world. You can see the software, you can modify it, you can make changes. The best part though about open source is when you share your changes back with the world so that everyone can benefit from your improvements. Well, let's go back to the Adopta app, right? Because Adopta is open source, it can be reused and it can be repurposed. For example, in Seattle, instead of adopting fire hydrants, they wanted to use it to adopt storm drains. So citizens can sign up and volunteer, and they're responsible for clearing out sticks and leaves and litter and other debris that keep the drains flowing from water, or from water from flowing into them. They can also report maintenance issues with the drains that they volunteered for. Well, let's take a trip out to Hawaii, and we can see how Adopta was used to create Adopt a Siren. Citizens sign up to assist with the testing of the tsunami sirens. And apparently, what I found out through my contacts there is that people steal the batteries from these life-saving sirens. So testing them is really important to that community. And as you can see here from the visual, there's a high level of engagement with the people of Hawaii for this Adopta program. So I saw an opportunity to bring this app to my city where I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. At the time, a few years ago, the city of Raleigh had announced kind of a traditional pen and paper program that would allow citizens to adopt bus shelters. So similar to sirens and storm drains and hydrants, citizens could adopt a bus shelter to help maintain the bus shelter or report any repairs or vandalism or graffiti or anything like that. So I saw an opportunity to bring some technology to the city, and I helped lead a group of volunteers to prototype what Adopta could look like for the bus shelter program here. We had all the data, and it just took a matter of time of getting access to it and making a pitch to the Department of Transportation. And within 2 to 3 weeks, we had a working prototype up and running, and we were able to bring this pen and paper initiative into a digital format. So my personal mission for the last 9 years has been to improve the citizen experience through civic tech. And through this experience, I discovered my superpower, and that is the power of community organizing. I find that what I really enjoy is to create an environment for people to do amazing things and to hopefully re-engage with local government. Try to find ways for people to participate and increase their engagement. We tend to find workarounds or what we call hacks to broken policies or to broken systems that aren't efficient or that have been neglected. But civic tech is evolving, and we've learned a lot from a lot of the early experiments we've conducted over the years. Many of us, civic hackers and civic geeks, we want to inspire change. And when you think about it, particularly in these days, really the only people who can change government is us. And it may not be fast, and it definitely isn't pretty, but if we want to change our communities, we can't wait for someone else to do it. And I've just seen civic tech as a great way, a new way to volunteer in the digital age here. So I'd like to introduce you to Code for America. They're a nonprofit with a mission to make government services simple, effective, and easy to use. It's a network of people helping government work for citizens and people in the digital age. And they have a variety of programs and initiatives that they run and operate. One I kind of mentioned earlier is the fellowship program. This is the way that they created the Adopta application in partnership with the city of Boston. Now what they'll do is they'll partner with different cities and identify applications that they can build to help to solve some of their problems. They also build applications, and this isn't really their specialty, but they've got a few, and by specialty, I mean that's kind of not the only thing they do. They've chosen very strategic apps to build. For example, they have an app called Clear My Record, and it gives people with past convictions a second chance to help clear their clear their record expungement. Or they've got another app that they participate in called Get Cal Fresh. And it really is helping to revitalize how government delivers food assistance to families in need. And basically, it's making applying for and getting food stamps easier and less embarrassing. And they've done a lot of research and really improved the user experience of what Get Cal Fresh can do for the people of California. I find Code for America a great organization to be a part of. Really because they're just helping so many people who need help and need assistance. My involvement with Code for America is primarily through their brigade network. Brigades are volunteers, groups of volunteers who work with local government to improve their community. In fact, I just got off right before this. We were just having one of our virtual meetups for this month. There are volunteers from all over the United States that participate in the brigade program, and really they get organized and they host meetups and other events to promote their causes, to make their cities better, and really using civic hacking to do that. There are more than 80 brigades across the United States, so we're also finding ways to work together across the boundaries of cities and states, and I'll share a few examples of that here shortly. We have several brigades here in the Southeast. Here in North Carolina, for those of you in NC, we have 7 brigades: Asheville, Cary, Chapel Hill, Charlotte, Durham, Greensboro, and Raleigh. We have an aspiring brigade in the Wilmington area called Code for Cape Fear. So for those of you not in NC, I would encourage you to visit brigade.codeforamerica.org, where you can find a brigade near you, or perhaps you may want to dive in and start your own. And there's plenty of people that will help you get started. So I want to tell a story about how brigades can work together. And particularly, we see this happen in times of crisis. So one example was during Hurricane Florence a few years ago. Brigades in the Southeast worked together to crowdsource open data. We were calling hurricane shelters to get information, how many beds they have available, do they take pets, various questions that people were asking. And we were getting the data out in real time. But the really cool thing is we didn't have to start from scratch. We were able to redeploy technology from previous brigades that had built this in Texas and Florida due to the response to Hurricane Harvey and Irma in 2017. So because we already had kind of the technology backend, we were able to spin up a site fairly quickly and enable volunteers to enter real-time data. In fact, we were entering data faster than Red Cross and FEMA were able to get their updates out on a daily or a 12-hour basis. We were getting out hourly updates, which was really critical, particularly during the peak of the storm when, as the storm was moving over the Southeast, some shelters were closing because they were in the path and some other shelters were opening up. And the other really huge benefit about this is that at the end of the day, it opened up the doors for some conversations about how to be a better partner in the future, and also started the conversation about an open data standard for the shelter information. If we look at the current crisis, there's several projects that people are starting to get involved in and projects that are already in motion. So there is one example that I learned about is Project Chime. It was developed by Predictive Healthcare at Penn Medicine, and the purpose is to assist hospitals and public health officials with hospital capacity planning. They partnered with the fine group of folks over at Code for Philly to get the project up and running. So that's one that I wanted to highlight. If you go to brigade.codeforamerica.org/projects, you're able to search the entire list of projects that they're working for. I just did a search here for COVID-19, and you can see that there's other projects around just kind of using and handling COVID-19 data. There's food mapping projects, and there's much more to look at and get involved with. So a lot of times in a couple of talks, I mentioned kind of three models of civic tech. The first model is what I call greenfield. This is where you start something new. It's something that doesn't exist. And there are a lot of benefits to that, and then there's a lot of drawbacks. Some of the benefits include you get to pick your application stack, and you get to kind of do user interviews and figure out what are the consumers of the app, what do they really need, and what do they think they want. There are drawbacks, like you get to choose the application stack because after you start building it, you're going to want to change it anyway. The second model is kind of a couple different ways to think about it. It's reuse or cloned, the clone model, which is essentially the open source model, as I pointed out with the Adopt a project. It's something that's already out there, and it's something that can be repurposed either with a different data set or be able to take the base code base and add a different feature to it, something that you need that could then benefit someone else down the road. And then there's something I've been exploring over the last few years called the augmentation model. This is, in my view, a government-led project that brings in citizen volunteers to help, brings in citizen volunteer power to prototype or to help build out a solution or to maybe kick the tires on a solution and give feedback to the government project. I think that this augmentation model has a lot of potential, and it's really untapped practice that we could really explore, and maybe we'll see some benefits of that after we get through this. But I want to take a look at the augmentation model in practice, something that I got to be a part of. But really quick, I'm going to see if I can. One moment. Okay, I'm not able to see the chat functionality while I present. However,
can I help you by doing a poll with this question?
Yes, I want to do a poll. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll get that out right now.
Okay, this is really simple. Vote on the poll if I'd like to know if anyone looks up restaurant health inspection score data before you go out to eat. Or we can modify that since we're doing takeout now. So if before you take out or before you go out to eat, if you look up health inspection scores. So I'm going to keep talking and we're going to come back to those results here in a moment. So I'll be curious to see what we have. So while we wait for those results, I'm sure many of you have seen signs like this at restaurants. But what if that information was available where you actually look for places to eat? You know, somewhere like Yelp. Imagine that. Well, I don't know if it's available in all locations, but at least here where I live in Wake County in Raleigh, North Carolina, I did a search for best tacos and I found this restaurant called Virgil's, which I've actually been to before. And if I scroll down a little bit, I could see their health inspection data. They got a 97 out of 100, which is probably a good thing. But we have historical data here as well. And you can look down and see that in November of 2016, they had 22 violations and they had a score of 85, which maybe that's not so good. That probably looks like a mid B to me. All right, so there's the poll. Thanks for doing that on the fly. We'll check those results in a few minutes. So let's get back to the augmentation model. I'm actually going to vote. Let us see. Oh, I can't vote. Oh, well. Fun stuff. All right, so let's get back to this augmentation model. It was 2016, and we had a team from the local Wake County IT staff here in Raleigh. And they started a project related to this health inspection score data. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to add in what they call risk factors. And so the goal would be to allow people to drill down into the health inspection score on Yelp and see and to learn more about the various violations. So you could learn more about, like, was the raw meat left out, or was it improperly labeled food, or whatever the violation was. And they wanted to give more context to those violations. So let's say, if it was a box stored on the floor improperly, maybe that's not as bad as cutting raw meat or you're preparing vegetables. And so that I'll leave those decisions up to you as how you feel, whether that's right or wrong. But those things do influence the health score. So this team, again, they didn't have to start from scratch because there's a lot of code out there. There's a lot of projects. And so they found a project called NC Food Inspector, which was put on by the fine groups over at Code for Durham. So they were able to kind of come in and bring this project back to life. They worked on developing some iconography, which you can see here on the screen, to help visualize what some of the code violations were. And this example shows risk factors such as personal hygiene, inadequate cooking, or unsafe food storage and things like that. So before I go on, do we have some results? I have a prediction of what they might be.
It looks like only 54% of our viewers logged in have voted. So if you haven't, we'll give you 20 more seconds to get your vote in. If you click, there should be a poll that popped up for you.
Cool. All right, we'll go through this slide and then check back in. So at the end of this event cycle in 2016, the CIO of Wake County, Bill Greaves, approached me. He was like, hey, he really was kind of fascinated by what he did. He had a team led by his staff that engaged with volunteers from the Code for Durham and Raleigh brigades and beyond. And we kind of found a way to work together. And so this was essentially kind of a minimum viable prototype for us, and really answering the question, could government successfully partner with civic tech volunteers? Well, the answer was yes, but with a kind of a little bit of a caveat. I think the reason why this project in particular was successful is that we found a short-term project with strong project management, and those were kind of the keys to the success there. So the Open Rally Brigade wanted to expand on this prototype, and so in 2017, and we expanded on that project, the concept of the augmentation model in 2017, and we continually look for ways to leverage this augmentation model. So let's see what the results are.
Can you see the results on your end? You need me to read them out to you?
I only see the poll.
All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. So 69% of our folks have voted, and we have 3%. Oh, it just changed for 72% voted. So 5% of the people dialed in always look up health inspection scores before getting food from restaurants. All right. And we have 37% at sometimes, and 59% said no, never.
All right. Well, maybe this presentation will influence you to change your habits. Well, thanks everyone for participating. That's great to have some engagement there. All right, so before we change gears, I wanted to talk a little bit about the future of civic tech. So during my kind of time volunteering over the last 9 years and this civic tech movement, oh, now the results popped up. There we go. So that's how it goes. I've seen a lot of trial and errors. I've seen a lot of pivots. I've seen failures. I've seen successes. And the game continues to change and evolve. And the best part about this Code for America network is that we share a lot of this knowledge with each other. We have a really robust discourse forum where there's a lot of knowledge sharing. People aren't afraid to ask questions. They'll ask you what worked, what didn't. And there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of knowledge sharing there, which is great to be a part of. But civic tech to me now, and as we go into 2020 and beyond, it's not another app for government or for government services. It's creating a better experience. Civic tech is not these 24 or 48-hour hackathons where teams and projects pop up over the weekend and then they disappear. Civic tech needs to be more sustainable than that. Civic tech is, in my opinion, shifting to smart cities, which it sounds like the previous speaker was talking a little bit about, or what we're calling smart community initiatives. And then finally, civic tech is volunteer civic technologists and civic geeks working in partnership with government based on this augmentation model and not being that kind of rogue civic hacker trying to be the lone wolf and solve a big problem on their own. So for a long time, and probably still true, brigades relied on participation, on participant input around their passions and really kind of whoever was showing up to our meetups. And so the Open Rally Brigade wanted to kind of change that. And so we wanted to have a little bit more focus and change our focus on the next cool app, and wanted to shift our efforts to be to more in line with actual government objectives. We wanted to connect our volunteer efforts with kind of meaningful outcomes. And I know it probably sounds pretty boring. It probably sounds pretty like, well, why didn't you just do that in the first place? But this is something that I've seen evolve over the years. So I want to share kind of what we did and how we approached that. So we actually just started meeting with our government partners and talking with them and getting input from key leaders. Just this past January, before all this stuff started, the Open Rally Brigade leadership team had a chance to sit down with the City of Raleigh and Wake County IT staff, and we talked about what are some of the challenges facing our community. The first version of this, what it looked like is the county commissioners come out with a list of like 75 goals for the entire county across all the various departments. So we narrowed that list down to kind of 10 to 12 that we thought would map to good civic tech projects. We sent out a survey to our brigade to get their feedback and input. We hosted a special meetup to get an in-person feedback and some discussion around that. We narrowed it down to top 3, and then we worked with the county and city staff to have someone help from the city or county help lead that effort. And we got 2 of those projects through our event pipeline, which was a good success for us. So 2 out of 3 isn't bad. But that seemed to work really well. So we're continuing to iterate on that. So what we're looking at this year, we didn't need to go through that entire process again. We felt within the group of people that we had a good variety and a good mix of folks, that the topics that are facing our community are pretty evident, at least here in our area, where we have a lot of growth. So we're seeing issues around affordable housing, which is a huge topic. So we definitely have to narrow that down to something more digestible. Transportation's been a nagging issue here on the various fronts. And then we know we have the census happening this year. So if you haven't done your census, please find that mail or the 4 or 5 pieces of mail that they sent you and complete your census. Probably takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we've recently started a project on campaign finance data, which is really fascinating. So for the last few minutes here, I want to talk more about the Open Raleigh Brigade. Again, we're the local chapter here in Raleigh of Code for America. Our goal is to create an environment for people to do great work and for us to provide that safe place to do it. And so I want to highlight a couple projects that we worked on lately and a couple things that we've done. So this was a really interesting idea. I'm talking with the rest of the Code for America network. I'm not sure anyone else had done anything like this, but 2 years ago in 2018, we hosted an event called Lunch with a Govy. And that's exactly what it was. The brigade sponsored lunch. We partnered with Wake County and we met in their cool collaboration space, which if you can imagine any sort of government space, think the opposite. This was a really open, and you can see from the picture, kind of a fresh and inviting environment. And we had a mix of, our attendees included government workers, brigade members, elected officials, and we actually had someone from Code for America be able to come out and participate as well. Needless to say, this was a huge success. We probably had 25, 30 people show up, 12 o'clock on a Wednesday. And really there was no agenda. We just got together and we talked. And so we're looking at doing this again when we can meet in person. And we also consider doing what we call a government partner reverse pitch, which is where we would invite a department, someone from the department to come and pitch a problem. And then we could all work during that lunchtime to generate ideas on different approaches and ways they could solve that problem. Also in 2018, we had a wildly successful project called NC ClearPath. They emerged from one of our civic camp events on conferences, and it was a collaboration between the Code for Durham folks and the Open Raleigh Brigade. The project itself, NC ClearPath, it wanted to build upon 2 existing projects, a project called Chai Safe Path and an open source projects like accessmap.io. And the project itself was to help map accessibility routes for pedestrians. And so they wanted to report, map, and plan around nearly anything that could be an obstacle for accessibility, curb cuts, crosswalks, construction, and many things like that. What they found, though, is that there's actually not a lot of sidewalk data available. And so they used OpenStreetMaps and hosted various mapathons throughout the year to get people involved, and they could get someone up and running in about 10 minutes, and that's including account creation on OpenStreetMaps. And they made a little grid, and they assigned a grid to a person, and they would go in and they would map out sidewalks and curb cuts and crosswalks and all those things. So it was really great to see that project come to life, and really great to see people engaged with that. So kind of mentioned in the beginning, the Open Raleigh Brigade, we use in person, and now our meetups have gone virtual to help foster sustainable projects. In fact, the one advantage about having the virtual is that we're able to bring in some expertise that aren't able to be here physically. As an example, the previous meetup on campaign finance data, we had folks, we had actually had someone from San Francisco who's interested in this topic, was able to join our call, which was really cool. But we have an event series that we call NC Open Pass. And usually what we do is in the spring, actually it's on the next slide. In the spring, we'll start with Open Data Day, then we'll do our meetup series, and then end the spring with an unconference in June. We're uncertain if that's gonna happen this year, but we're gonna make that decision here soon. And then we do the same thing in the fall. We'll kick off with a lightning talk series, and then we'll do our meetups, and then we'll end with a civic tech showcase. So basically we kind of, we design and we kind of create some of the projects in the spring, and then we really drive them in the fall to some sort of better state or a more completed state. So just to talk about a few other projects that we had last year, we had Triangle Innovation Hub, and this was a group of high school students who went through a program called District C, and they partnered with one of our partners called Innovate Raleigh, and they basically were mapping entrepreneurial and startup resources for the Triangle area. So it's basically kind of an online resource hub by 2 high school students, which is pretty cool all in itself. So these guys are coming to our meetups, working on the project, and then going home and applying for college. So that was an interesting way to spend their time. For those of you that don't live here in Raleigh, we have a huge area of 300-acre land that was recently acquired over the last few years by the city to kind of to be converted into a huge park called Dick's Park. And so there was a group that wanted to install Raspberry Pis with sensory activity to start getting an understanding of what features of the park people were using right now to help influence the master planning of the park. And then for those of you that experienced our weather earlier this week with tornado warnings and a huge cold front that came through, there's this project called Red Alerts that's aimed at doing taking the data from tornado warning systems and adding in shelter information, so that when you get a tornado warning, you would also get information on where the nearest shelter is, and that would be really helpful if that was available. So this year we've got 2 projects that we're working on during the spring. I've kind of mentioned this first one already, but this campaign finance dashboard is really looking to bring in is to allow campaign finance data, which is any candidate who's running for elected of office has to file with the State Board of Elections, and they have to submit certain information about how much money is being donated, how they're spending their money, you know, which individuals or corporations or entities or organizations are contributing. And so the data is available, it's just not user friendly. And so this project is looking to make that data more useful by putting up basically a human-friendly dashboard to it, as opposed to searching a spreadsheet. And then secondly, some folks out of Wilmington, North Carolina are working on a project called Stay Neighbor, where they're basically trying to kind of build, not necessarily a marketplace, but an application that matches people's needs with people who can volunteer to meet those needs. So in the demo they did earlier this evening, if I needed something, I could go in and type in, you know, I need food, or I need clothing, and then type in all the information, and then that could be matched with someone who is willing to donate food or donate clothing or whatever the need is, and also deliver that. So there looks like some potential there for that. So what I wanted to leave you with is just a couple thoughts on how ways that we can have more sustainable civic tech, because I think this has been the real challenge over the last few years as civic tech has grown. And it's really about making those strategic partnerships, and that's both with government partners and community partners, really helping us identify which projects are worthwhile so that we can work on stuff that matters. The second one is to engage with civic tech volunteers, focus their passion with the strategy and kind of play this matchmaker so that we can get people who want to use their skills for good and get them to the right projects. And I'm going to harp on this augmentation model because I really think it has so much potential. But use this model with government partners and community partners to help them with their projects. Fourth is to use open data source. Use open data and really to curate data sets for quicker response. And so there's a lot of different open data out there. So consulting with people who are a little bit more savvy and expert with open data so that you can get to the right sets faster just saves everyone time. And then finally, keep your community updated on progress through meetings, blogs, posts, social media, wherever folks may want to find information. So that's kind of why I like giving talks like this and sharing. I don't know, I probably talked about at least 15 or so different projects tonight that people could get involved with. So that's my ask is if this is interesting to you, is to get involved, hit up brigade.codeforamerica.org and see what brigades are out there. Or if you're in the Triangle area, the Cary, Chapel Hill, Durham, and Raleigh brigades share a meetup page. Triangle Code for America doesn't really exist as an entity other than it's a group of brigades. And so those could be some next steps for you if you're interested. And really what I want to leave you with, the mission that I'd like you to take is that, civic tech really isn't about the technology, it's about the people. It's about partnerships. And when you add passion and alignment into the mix, and you can really sustain some amazing outcomes. So I'd ask for you to discover your passion, make great partnerships, and let's continue to evolve civic tech to not only work in our communities, but to work for our communities. I want to thank you for your time this evening, and I'm happy to move into Q&A if I'm sure I've not covered everything.
Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions from our attendees. First would be, what's the most important work needed to help open source move into an AI-focused programming world?
Oh, that's a really cool question. I am not an expert on the AI stuff, so I may not be the right person to ask that. But there is a lot of work around, I'm trying to think of the project name now. Let's see here. If you are interested in open source and AI, I would definitely encourage you to check out a project called TensorFlow. That's really where a lot of the open source movement is around AI technology. So that's the project to get involved with.
Next question, are there any competitive fully open source alternatives to Android that you know of?
Now, Android is open source. So on the mobile front, a couple of my coworkers have different hardware devices, but I still think they're Android based. So unfortunately, I'm not the expert in mobile either. Sorry.
Do you have to be a coder to join the Triangle Brigade?
Absolutely not. In fact, at our meetup tonight, we have several new folks who don't have any coding experience at all. We had some user experience folks join us. In fact, the guy leading the campaign finance dashboard is very clear that he's not a coder, not a technologist. He's actually a journalist, but he wants access. He wants easier access to this data. So we very much welcome non-coders. In fact, we actually don't do a lot of coding at our events. We do a lot more kind of prototyping and user experience type things, design work. In fact, like myself, I would not consider myself a coder, even though I know enough to be dangerous. I'm more on the organizing side. So what I'm able to bring to the civic tech space is organizing people and understanding what they want to do and pointing them in the right direction and getting out of the way. But I would encourage anyone who is non-technical or who might be new to technology, we welcome all, and we love to have a diverse group of people working on these projects.
Next one from one of our guests. Where do the problems you solve come from? Is it directly from the citizens or the city or both?
It's a little bit of both. I would say in the beginning, and when we started this 8 or 9 years ago, it was just whoever showed up. It's like, hey, I want to demo this cool thing I've been working on. So that's kind of how we started. So we're still open to ideas, and anyone can bring a project, propose a project to the brigade, and I don't know if necessarily we have to approve it, but we kind of give it a blessing. But what I was trying to describe earlier is that where we've gone over the last 2 to 3 years is we are meeting with government officials and asking them, what are some of the challenges you're facing? Where can we complement the work that you're doing? And so that's the projects that we're really interested in working on. They may not be the sexiest projects, but they're the ones where they need help. And that's really what our mission is to help our government partners.
Awesome. I know we're a little past 8. Do we have steam for a couple more questions from attendees? Jason? Are you open to answering a couple more attendee questions?
Yes, I'm sorry. I
Awesome.
thought, yeah, no, let's go. Let's keep going.
Cool. We have 3 more and then we'll wrap up. So now we're getting a little late here. How can open source businesses coexist or live with AWS?
Fascinating. So I might give kind of a little bit of my RedHat answer, is that open source really isn't a business model. It's a development model. And so there's a lot of intertwining with that. So like, although all of RedHat's technology is open source and available, source code available, our business model is really around a subscription. Where we're preparing all of the bits and technology components together to make it easily consumable for enterprise companies. So what, it's just like any subscription to, like I always think about like a magazine subscription, right? If you have a favorite magazine, at the end of the 12 months, you have to renew your subscription. Did it provide value? Did it give you the information you wanted? Or, and then you have to renew it. So Red Hat, from a sales side, is we're looking to provide value to our customers, and they'll renew their subscription if they want to. So as far as competing with AWS, I mean, I just tweeted the other day that AWS should buy the US Postal Service, because this way we could just get our packages even faster, since they don't have enough money. But the real answer is that open source is more a development model, not a business model. So it's tough to really get down into the weeds on that one. Hopefully that's helpful.
Next question. Have you found out a good time of year to meet with government employees or meet with, to coincide with budgeting and planning?
So the first, my first reaction to that would be is find out when their planning cycle is, because it usually happens months in advance. So for example, a lot of governments are on a July to June budget cycle. So for me, like, we find it useful to meet with them in January and February. And so I'm setting up meetings with our government folks in November before we go off to the holidays. And this way, when we come back in January, we already have a meeting on the calendar, and we're getting ahead of the budget cycle. And so that's been a huge benefit to us. This way, if we have to allocate any resources for projects that we're going to work on, we can work that into the budget. Or, there's kind of some fun ways where you can play around with some discretionary budget if you needed to. But find out when the budget cycle is, and then get ahead of it about 8 months.
Good answer. Any tips on joining a brigade, and what is the barrier of entry, if any?
I would hope and want to imagine that all brigades are as welcoming as ours. Right now it's probably really easy to kind of just pop in, since all of our events are virtual for the foreseeable future. So there's nothing wrong with popping in for 30 minutes. And we often get people just say, hey, I just want to see what your group is about. And I think, right now during this age of virtual meetups, I would recommend doing that. Or you can kind of check out the projects they're working on and see if they're interested. And I would also say that, you know, you don't have to join your local brigade. If you want to be a part of a brigade that's a couple states away and they're just working on a cool project, you can just be part of the brigade network. But I do think you need to associate yourself with a brigade. So if there's like in-person stuff, you know, maybe being part of a brigade like in California wouldn't be a wise choice. But like I said, we're finding ways to work together across the nation, particularly in times like this.
Awesome. The last question says, for Mary, what's your Twitter or blog URL? I'm not very active on Twitter, so maybe not the best place to follow content, but Tech Talent South has a blog. It's blog.techtalentsouth.com. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, just /Mary LaChapelle. And that is the last of our questions from the attendees. Jason, thank you so much for your time, for putting together this presentation. To everyone who dialed in, we still have some folks who were here for the full 3 hours. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us. Tomorrow, we're diving into people and culture. So definitely come back. We'll be covering bridging the gap in leadership training, diversity, equity, inclusion in tech, averting the talent crisis. I know this will be close to Jason's heart, building authentic culture and community in tech, and then leading a global remote workforce. So Jason, thank you for your time. Thanks again to everyone who dialed in. We hope to see you all tomorrow.